We run an urban planning and urban design firm in Dar es Salaam. And when we say that to people, people say, wow, there sure is a great need for a plan in this city. And then we start talking about the future prospects of Dar, and well, most people are pretty grim about that. And words like development and progress are words that crop up quite quickly. And now, when I sat down to think about this talk and the overarching theme of that, yes, in my lifetime, those three things sort of molded together because, yes, in my lifetime is about the future. Development and progress, those three things match, and they are, in fact, a lot of what urban planning is about. We need to deal with a future plan for how not to make buildings collapse, for how not to let kids grow up in insalubrious conditions, and how to deal with, I think, people's two favorite topics in Dar, traffic and flooding. Now, what we do as urban planners is that we dream up a future. Now, it might not look like this, hopefully not. But be more precise, urban planning is about creating strategies and plans for getting somewhere in the future. And the idea of the future is very strong in our field, but I'm here to tell you that it's a simple thing, really. And it's one that we're all, I think, aware of, and I think it applies to a lot of fields. And that is that sometimes progress is defined by history. And what I mean by that is that if we want to get somewhere in the future, we need to know where we're at presently. And if we want to know where we're at presently, we need to be able to analyze our past. And the point of urban planning is sometimes to allow for plans and strategies to get to somewhere else in the future, somewhere that is not on the current trajectory that we're on. And while we're talking of multiple futures, we can also talk about multiple pasts, because who writes history? What is history? History is written by people in power. What about the powerless? Who gets to write their history? How are they represented? And how are they represented presently? And while all of these ideas are well and good, they're things that, unfortunately, planners in Dar es Salaam have to deal with on their spare time, because during work hours, the problem is this. We really don't have a plan for the future. This is the current master plan, and it does say 1979, and that was the year I was born. It's obsolete. Here's another problem facing planners during work hours. Dar es Salaam doesn't exist. This doesn't really exist. This is just a map. This is what exists. 3 municipalities and no overarching structure. So if you want to do an overarching urban development project in Dar, you have to go through 3 planning municipalities. You have to do 3 times the paperwork, 3 times the hassle, 3 times the setbacks, and 3 times the frustration. But if we start looking into history and the history of this city, we find that maybe this isn't really the crux of the problem. Maybe the problem is this, that this is Dar es Salaam. Dar es Salaam is a lot of villages. Villages that became very urban very quickly and are now a metropolis. We all know this story, this history of Dar es Salaam. It's the history of the harbor, it's the history of Arabic influence, it's the history of the Germans and the European, or the British, the European quarters, the Asian quarters here, and also the African settlements. Another history that we don't know that much about is the history of the villages that surrounded Dar, that became what Dar is today. If you go outside of the city core, and the city core in Dar is quite small compared to the rest of Dar, you will inadvertently be in what used to be a village, and those structures are still there. I mean, the buildings have changed, they've become modern, people have changed, their cars, but the structure, the baseline structure, is still that of a village. And we know very little about this. We know very little about this development. And if we knew more about that development, it would change the way we perceive this city, and it would change the way we as urban planners deal with urban planning in Dar. So not only does history allow us to rethink the structure of the city, it also allows us to question the logic of the current building strategy in this city. There are a lot of buildings coming up, and they're tall, and they have glass facades, and they are basically just greenhouses that need electric cooling in order to be habitable. And that is completely unsustainable, because for a lot of the time, this city is running on diesel fumes. And we're only building more and more of these buildings. Now, the Tanzanian government has, they've decided to become a middle-income country in a few years. And that's great, that's wonderful. That's what we all should be striving for. It's more power to them. But that will entail that a lot of poor people, and a lot of those poor people live in Dar es Salaam, a lot of poor people will be less poor in the future. And those people will not want to live the way that they're living now. They will want to change their lifestyles for the better. And changing their lifestyles for the better means that they will want a car. It will mean that they want a better and a bigger house for themselves and their families. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, these are the bigger, better houses. And that is a very frightening thought. But we just need to go a few years back into history, and we can see a whole different style of architecture that was emerging in the 60s and 70s in Dar that we just forgot. It's an architecture that is contextual, that really owns up to the fact that this is a hot and humid climate. It allows for cross-ventilation, it allows for ample sun shading, it allows for stack effects to bring in cool air and blow out hot air. So what I'm here to tell you is that when I say that progress is defined through history, I mean to say that we have been here before. We just forgot. And I think we shouldn't be so good at forgetting, because there are some great solutions to the urban problems that we're facing today and in the future for the city yet to come that we can find in our history. Now, when I say that, I also mean another thing, and it ties in with the idea of history. I also mean that we need to look at the city from a more cross-vocational perspective. Now, this is what we think about when we think about cities. This is Kariako, you all know it. It's dense, it's full of buildings, it's full of infrastructure and technical stuff. It's what architects, planners, and engineers deal with. That is the city. Wrong. This is also the city. These, ladies and gentlemen, are people. These are social relations, these are economic transactions, and these are cultural expressions. This is also Kariako. It's the only place in Africa that I know of, in urban Africa, where the city becomes, or these streets become de facto pedestrianized. Just so many people, it pushes out the cars. It's amazing. We should have more of that. But these are soft assets, and we need to understand these people in order to create better future cities. We can't just deal with buildings. I need to understand you guys in order for me to do my job. If not, I'm not doing it. And in order for us to do that, we need to bring in sociologists, we need to bring in historians, we need to bring in anthropologists, and we need to bring in geographers, and we need to plan those cities together. And it's not what I'm saying now, the interdisciplinary part is again something we can learn from history. There's something there in history for us to learn, because we have been there before as well. The 1960s and 1970s we did some great, I say we, but obviously not me, but hey. There was some great work done on urban issues in African cities. This is from Nairobi, Etherton's study from 1972 of Mathara Valley. You're welcome to try to find it. It's very hard to find. But it's a damn good study, sorry. It's really great. And it is an interdisciplinary piece of work. Here's another one, even harder to find. Janet Budra's Pumwani, The Politics of Property, probably, hands down, the best piece of writing I have ever read on an urban area in Africa, period. And she is not an architect, she's not an urban planner, she is a social scientist. And if we really want to go there, we can go as far back as 1948 and the Colonial Master Plan for Nairobi. Now, we can obviously discuss the contents of that plan, and we can discuss the merits and the ideas behind it. But it has shaped the Nairobi that we now know today, and it is the basis for the two plans that have succeeded it. And it was done as an interdisciplinary piece of work, architects and sociologists and planners. Now, the point of this talk is very simple. Progress is sometimes defined through history, but we just tend to forget to go back and remember. And in terms of the question of, well, we absolutely need to bring in all of this, the history and the social sciences, the interdisciplinarity, into making our cities better than they are today. That is the future for cities. That is the only way to create a better Dar es Salaam. And in terms of the question of whether or not this is achievable in our lifetimes, I say we have already done it. We just forgot. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's about high time that we start remembering. Thank you very much.